So my sermon title was Heaven is Near. And it is still my sermon title today, though today's Sunday is Stewardship Sunday. So I was going to preach that we needed to give like heaven depends on it because it does, which, by the way, I still fully believe. But you may be wondering why, after coming home from Minneapolis, after the brutal murder in broad daylight of Alex yesterday on the streets, that my colleagues who are still in town showed up to pastor to the pastors and the people who were gathered at that site lamenting and mourning. You might wonder why I still want my sermon to be called Heaven is Near. I left and Sherry left our gathering in Minnesota this week. We came home early Saturday morning and we were filled with hope. We were convinced that another world is absolutely possible. And that is because the people of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and St. Paul, Minnesota, have convinced us that that world is already here, that heaven is near. And despite that murder yesterday morning, I believe that with all of my heart. I believe with all of my heart that Minneapolis is winning, that love will win, that we will win, and that the kingdom of heaven is still near. And I want to tell you just today about why. And I want you to know that I did not plan like I normally do down to the very last perfectly precise word what I would say to you today because I am overwhelmed and I'm still processing. And yesterday I gave a sermon to my poor children in the car that was very, very angry and raw. One of the things that I learned from my Minneapolis colleagues was to show up grounded and present and to remember um, that when there is a clear good and evil, um, there is a side to pick. This is not a gray area moment. You know, I love nuance, but this is not a nuance moment. There is good and there is evil, and we stand on the side of good, and we will win because love always wins. And if love has not won yet, it is not the end. Okay? That's the first thing I want you to know. The other thing I want you to know is that the people of Minneapolis, Minnesota are not protesters, not at all. They are not agitators. They are not even protesters. They are neighbors being neighbors to one another. That is all they are. The people of Minneapolis, Minnesota, people like Renee Good, who was shot and killed by ICE officers, 2 weeks ago? She was just doing what every person in Minneapolis has been doing for the last 50 days, which is to show up and witness for her neighbors, which is to help organize through her son's preschool what to do to keep the children safe when ICE show up on their street. And I want you to know that while we were in Minneapolis, ICE was a constant presence. There are upwards of 3,000 of them in Minneapolis, and there are 600 members of the Minneapolis police force, if that gives you an understanding. They are in they are an occupied city. They are occupied. And it is so important to know this. And because ICE has been showing up at their daycares, their schools every day at parent drop off and pickup. They are throwing teachers to the ground in front of students. Their children are traumatized. So parents are doing things like organizing driving kids to school because parents are too scared if they are black and brown, not if they are citizens or not citizens, never mind that, if they're immigrants at all. And if they are American citizens who are black and brown, they are not leaving their house because there is absolutely no guarantee that they will not be physically violated, detained, and God forbid, sent away to a detention camp and nobody knows where they are. We spent time this week with the Native American population of Minneapolis. Um, Sherry and I both went to the All Nations Church, which is in the Native American neighborhood of Minneapolis. You may not know this, but Minneapolis boasts the second largest population, urban population of Native Americans in the country. So this is a large population of Native American urban dwellers. Their their neighborhood is already a really poor neighborhood. There's a lot of unhoused people. The church there is doing incredible work, trying to get drugs off their streets and trying to help people who are unhoused. And the Native American population has been constantly detained by ICE. In fact, three of the community members of this church are still missing, having been detained by ICE weeks ago. They have no idea where they are. They are not immigrants, they are native to this country. So we learned a lot about the ways in which the Native Americans are trying to keep their communities safe. We heard from a large, very poor Latino church in the city of Minneapolis that is showing up to church unafraid, that is packing, everyone in the city is participating in, it looks like our Food is Love program looked like in during COVID. All of the churches and synagogues and mosques and religious organizations are all doing mutual aid. They are all packing food boxes and they are delivering them constantly to people who cannot leave the house because immigrants have stopped going to work. They are not able to leave the house at all, and ICE has now begun to without judicial warrants, break down people's stores. So the people of Minneapolis, just the normal neighbors, not protesters, not agitators, just neighbors being neighbors, have signed up to bring people food, to bring kids to school, to whenever ICE shows up in a neighborhood, they all wear whistles around their necks, almost everyone in the city. And if they see ICE, they blow whistles. They all show up and they film because that's all they can do. They can't interfere. They can film. They can try to help people. They can try to gum up the works so that somebody else, has some delay before ICE attacks them. They are trying to save their neighbors from being snatched. The children go to bed at night terrified because their classmates have been disappeared and they don't know where they are. Parents are completely traumatized because they are trying to do all this, go to work, take care of their children, and keep their children um, from being too scared. It is it is an all city effort just to stay alive and just to keep people from snatching their neighbors. Um, we had a panel, so I'm going to back up and tell you about why I was there. Um, uh, a week ago on Thursday, an organization called March, which is an organization of interfaith clergy in Minnesota, issued a call to all of the clergy of all faiths in the United States of America to come to Minneapolis. They issued this call for a few reasons. One is that they are so tired. These people, these clergy people, these faith leaders have been actively for the past 50 days been up all night organizing people, organizing food drives, um, collecting money because being evicted in Minneapolis, Minnesota is literally a death sentence. And if you can't go to work, you can't pay your rent. And the immigrants of the city can't go to work, so they can't pay their rent. So they are constantly setting up mutual aid funds and getting money to people, food to people, diapers to people. They told stories of delivering breast milk to newborn babies whose mothers had been taken by ICE, who hadn't who hadn't been able to ingest breast milk or be held by, their mother in days or weeks. So they're delivering breast milk in emergency situations. This is all while they also have to work at their jobs. These are just normal people. They're not protesting, they're just neighbors being neighbors. So the the clergy are exhausted. They're so tired. So for one thing, they just wanted us to come and help. Um, they wanted their colleagues there to help them witness and to pray for them and to be with them. So that was one reason. And the second reason, and they said this over and over again, is that this is coming to us next. And when I say us, I don't just mean Massachusetts. I mean, this is coming to our communities. And Minneapolis has so much to teach us. And we need to get ready because they weren't ready. And they are building the plane while it flies. And they have learned so much in 50 days. And because Minneapolis has been the center now of several struggles like this politically, from the George Floyd riots to also before that Standing Rock and marriage equality, they are very well connected with each other. And Minneapolis is sort of famously good at being good neighbors. So they are more prepared, frankly, than we are. And they had a lot to teach us about how to form networks, about how to create communities where we can provide mutual aid, how to stay safe, how to keep our neighbors safe. And so we're not talking like big sweeping political change. We're talking about just taking care of the people that we know and love and making sure that our children are safe and that nobody gets killed. And so they wanted us to come and learn from them quick so that we could bring it back to our communities so that we could be prepared, be ready. Um, and I have never had better training for ministry. And let's see, when did I start training for ministry? 16 years ago. In 16 years, I have never had better training for ministry than I did in those 2 days that we were in Minneapolis. I came home and Sherry came home completely inspired and convinced that Minnesota is winning and that we will win. So, and the devastating murder of Alex Pettis does not change that, but it does enrage me and it creates further resolve in me and in my colleagues that we must win. So, just to give you an update about what's happening there, my colleagues who didn't leave when Sherry and I left on Friday night were asked to stay after the murder of Alex Pettis. They were asked to stay to take care of our colleagues there in Minneapolis who were just arrested at the airport. 100 Minnesota clergy people were arrested at the airport. They were let off. Don't worry, they're all out. But they are completely traumatized by this murder. And the entire city is traumatized by this murder. And so they asked the colleagues that came to town from out of town. There were close to 1,000 of us that were still there in town to stay, to help triage, to help care for the neighborhoods, to help organize prayer vigils, and to take care of their colleagues who are still there and completely traumatized. So just an update, my colleagues are still there. They canceled they are not in church this morning. They are on the streets. Some of them were locked in a building yesterday outside where Alex Pettis was murdered, and waiting while the ICE agents prepared to arrest them with rubber bullets and tear gas. And they were locked in a building waiting to come out. I do want you to know that they finally did get out. But that's what my colleagues are doing. They are in danger. They had been followed while they were this was while I was still there. I just happened to not be on this bus, but they were on a bus doing a pilgrimage from the George Floyd Memorial to the Renee Good Memorial. And ICE was following my colleagues, my clergy colleagues, to disrupt their vigil when they detained an observer of this and beat them up. So my colleagues experienced this ICE presence the whole time we were there. I was sitting next to a man who was there from Cleveland, Ohio, one of my clergy colleagues from Cleveland, Ohio, who had just come home from observing a neighborhood with 200 of my other colleagues, but he was there with just 5 people sort of walking around a neighborhood. And he stopped with 3 of his clergy friends, ICE, from detaining a pregnant woman just by saying, do you have a judicial warrant, and blowing their whistles. And he said it was the most surreal experience. They had been in Minneapolis for 10 hours. While we were sitting in the church, we heard constant whistle blowing and beeping. This is happening on every street in every residential neighborhood. It's not happening in the metropolitan areas. It's happening in every neighborhood. And these are not protesters. These are just neighbors trying to make sure that their neighbors are safe. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the people that we learned from we learned a lot about coalition building. We learned a lot about nonviolent resistance and demonstration. We learned that our actions should be symbolic and disruptive and non-compliant, but peaceful. And we learned a lot about resilience from the people of Minneapolis. I want to tell you that the gathering that we had with the Minnesota clergy was joyful. It was powerful. It was emotional, and it was we were resolved. I want to ask Kristen to queue up a video from that gathering so you can get a sense of what it was like. There were 650 of us in a church in Minneapolis, one that I had been to for the Festival of Homiletics, so I was familiar with the church. And here's just a taste of what it looked like. Thanks, Kristen. I hope you can all see it. No one is getting left behind this time. No one is getting left behind.
Welcome to Minneapolis, y'all.
Oh, my friends, you are a beautiful, beautiful sight.
Here we are, Muslims and Christians, Sikh, Buddhist, Unitarian, Jews, atheists, Hindus, and more and more and more, united in our desire to confront this surge of ICE agents, this attack on democracy, and this attack on our neighbors.
Every single time somebody stands up and stands in opposition to this tyranny, it gives people courage to do likewise.
I am brave because we are brave.
I am brave because we are brave.
Atakwe Oyasu. We are all related.
We are part of a song of love that began long ago with our ancestors and will only get louder.
We know from other countries who have either defeated authoritarianism or are actively defeating it that we can do it too.
We need to take ownership of our country and what we become.
This is a bright line moment for our country and our values.
And we will not turn back.
This administration has no idea how soft and sweet true love and true care and true community can be. We are creative, we are irrepressible, we are brave.
We have everything we need right here.
So that says our demands: ICE must leave Minnesota now. The officer who killed Renee Good must be held legally accountable. No additional federal funding for ICE in the upcoming congressional budget, and ICE should be investigated for human and constitutional violations of Americans and our neighbors. We call upon Minnesota and national companies to become Fourth Amendment businesses, cease economic relations with ICE, and refuse ICE entry or using their property for staging grounds. Thanks, Kristen. You can stop sharing that screen now. I wanted to talk a little bit more about what I learned from the neighbors of Minneapolis. Um, they talked about epigenetic trauma, and I don't know a lot about epigenetic trauma, but it's the concept of the fact that our parents' trauma and their parents' trauma and et cetera live in our bodies. Yes, because post-traumatic stress is something that we carry in our actual genetics. It's a bodily experience. So scientists have proven that epigenetic trauma, like that our trauma can be passed down through our genes. And they wanted you all to know that if epigenetic trauma is real, so is epigenetic resilience. And they want you to know that they are rising to their resilience as they are traumatized. They said, we have everything that they need right there, right in their neighborhoods with their people. They want you to know that they don't want to be pitied, that they want to be known for that resilience. This is the immigrant population. This is the population of people who have just been figuring out how to love their neighbors better. They want you to know that they're doing things like their days are so much harder than they used to be. They have to figure out how to help people get to the doctor or get food, which always requires people to go ahead, check out the doctor's office, make sure that there are no ICE agents around so that people can get to their appointments. That the same thing with food. They need to figure out if there are ICE agents staging in the parking lot before they can leave. So somebody has to send, a citizen ahead of them or a white person ahead of them, really, because Black and brown people are being just picked off the street every day just for being Black and brown or speaking Spanish or being Somali or whatever. They said that they've changed their entire life to protect their community over the past 50 days. So some of them, and some of the things that they're dealing with, it's that there aren't enough immigration lawyers and the government isn't following the law at all. And they are, the organizers are privileged to be citizens, but they're still terrified as community organizers. It's wildly anti-Black. So Black people are particularly having a really difficult time trying to organize or protest. They're not coming. Black and brown people aren't coming to the protests. It's largely white. If you see that online, it's because Black and brown people cannot go to these things without being targeted. They're afraid to go to their jobs where they're already underpaid, and losing your job or not being able to pay rent, like I said, is a death sentence. So they are constantly giving money to people who cannot leave their homes so that they can pay their rent. And they are now preparing to open their homes for people who are going to lose their housing. So people are talking about, well, that's uncomfortable. I'm not sure if I want to live with another family. And the organizers are like, figure it out. It is the time. So they are now trying to figure out how to house people in their own homes. They are hyper focused and deep in hiding. the kidnapping by ICE is especially happening in rural areas where it is less densely populated in Minnesota. So this is not just happening in Minneapolis. In fact, it is a lot easier for it to happen in rural areas because there, you whistle and nobody comes, right? So they also want you to know that you are not safe because you live in a rural area or the suburbs. It's actually easier there. Um, these are all just ordinary people doing ordinary things. That's the other thing that they want you to know. People spend a day on patrol. Everybody signs up for a day on patrol, so that there's energy and attention on agents, that people are making sure that they film everything. The most effective thing that they've seen is just neighbors being neighbors. So these are not activists. These are not protesters. These are not agitators. They are just neighbors figuring out how to save their neighbors. Um, they stress all the time that it's nobody's responsibility but yours to confront ICE because nobody is coming to save them. And they also want to make sure that no one is ever alone. So that's why they blow whistles, to make sure that they are never alone when ICE is confronting anyone. It needs to be witnessed and documented, or people will be lost when they are detained. So every time someone stands up, it gives someone the courage to do so. They stressed how important it is to not be silent. We have not lost our democracy yet, but we will if we remain silent. Um, they want you to know that, as I already mentioned, they're going after the Native Americans, who have a lot of opinions about who's an illegal immigrant here in the United States. So I told this story on I also want to say that the neighbors in Minneapolis are remaining so incredibly calm, that there is constant violence being uh, inflicted on them, and they are calm, they are peaceful. When Renee Good said to the officer that shot her, "I'm not mad at you, dude," that's because they've all been trained in how to de-escalate, right? So all of the people in Minneapolis in these neighborhoods have been going to training to figure out how to de-escalate, to make sure that they are peaceful in all ways. Renee Good was one of those people. She was just an ordinary neighbor driving her kid home from school, to school, and encountered ICE. The people who we spoke to said this could have been any one of us because we all do this every single day. Every time we confront ICE, we stop our cars, we blow whistles, we make sure that the person who's being confronted is not alone. That's our job as neighbors. She was just doing her job. When she said, "I'm not mad at you, dude," that's because she knows how to de-escalate. There are people, there are ICE agents who are breaking down doors, uh, completely flouting the Fourth Amendment, which makes it illegal to do unnecessary search and seizure on people's homes. So neighbors are constantly going to other people's neighbors' houses to build back up the doors that have been broken down so that they're not freezing. It's all 100% illegal. They told us many stories, but I want to tell you a couple of really beautiful and heartening things. They told a lot of stories about how they started up these mutual aid operations. And this one woman, who's a white woman, who has a day job, is not a community organizer, has no idea how to do that. She just lives in a neighborhood that has daily ICE activity. And every morning when she goes to yoga, she has to stop and get out of her car, blow her whistle, record ICE. This is just her life on the way to yoga. And she had somebody reach out to her, and because they had a neighbor who needed some money. And she just said, "Yes, I will figure it out." They needed money to pay their rent. Sorry. She said, "Yes." And she wants you to know that when somebody asks for something, the answer should always be yes, even if you have no idea how to do it, even if, you haven't formed a committee yet to figure out how to um, how to raise a bunch of money or whatever. Just say yes and figure it out later, which is what she did. And so she called up an organizer that she knows in the area who's also there. She said, this family needs $1,000 to pay their rent this month. That organizer contacted her contacts, and in about 2 days, she had $300,000 that people had donated to a Venmo account. She was like, whoa, this happened in a couple days. She doesn't do this for a living. She has a Venmo account with $300,000. And she said, I guess this is my new day job. She named it Neighbors Helping Neighbors because it sounded like a good thing. And it's just clunky form that's shared person to person over Signal chat. They use all encrypted chats to share all of their information with people. And they went from a few requests like one day to 150 requests per day, 20 people to 1,200. There are 20 people working for her now, with up to 1,200 people that they're helping on a daily basis. She said, this is not my job. It's insane. Thousands of people's rents have been paid. And she said, this will become your life. In 50 days that ICE has been here, this is my new life. She said she's really lucky because her job has let her take some time off to help her neighbors. And she said to us, there's nothing, you can't do anything half-ass in this climate. She said, we want your full ass, not your half-ass. And she said, always say yes. When you get the call, say yes. It's not as hard as you think if you know how to neighbor. And in Minneapolis, we know how to neighbor. So she said, tap your networks, meet it with a yes. And just say yes and figure it out. It's going to be messy, but it's so much easier to build networks when you're not under duress. So do it now, she said. She said, make sure that you start to get to know your neighbors. You know everything about your neighbors. You know what they need. There's so many religious responses to this moment. All of the religious communities, not all of them, but most of them are working in response. And it's really inspirational to see what they're doing. They've been doing ride-along patrols in their clergy garb. They've been showing up just to be peaceful observers at protests or wherever they see ICE. They're called in all the time to just show up wearing their clergy collars so that they can sort of calm, like be movement chaplains. And they said that it works sometimes, like they've watched in real time law enforcement stop macing people when they see a clergy person. It can give them pause. So it's really important that leaders show up and are present, as the church, as the synagogue, as the mosque. And to constantly, they're also constantly checking in to make sure their friends are okay. Now, I want you to know all this. I will talk more about what we learned while we were there from the people of Minneapolis, who are the most resilient and proud and neighborly people I think I have ever met. But I want to say that, and I said this during Christmas this year, Jesus was born in the time of Herod. Yes, Jesus was born as the king was slaughtering babies. The kingdom of God is seated alongside violence, and it is always the time of Herod. Minneapolis is showing us what the kingdom of God looks like because they know how to neighbor. They said to us, we don't want to go back to the time before. We don't want to go back to, 10 years ago before the Trump administration. We want to continue this kind of way of living. We have learned so much about what the new world can look like, about building the world that we dream about. And they said, we're living it. We're living the world that we dream about while we are being occupied by hostile forces that are the American government. They said they believe in abundance and they live in abundance. We heard from a pastor who pastors a very poor Latino, just all Spanish speaking church in the city. Each of the people in that community makes 30 to 40K a year, and every single person in that community gives. They all pledge to the church. They all participate in stewardship. They believe in abundance. They believe that when we show up, we insist that the God that we serve is a God who will protect us and a God who demands that we take risks for each other. So they show up to church even though they are scared to come out of their houses because they believe in a God of abundance. They believe and they insist that the God they serve is a God who protects, a God who demands that they take risks for each other. And they want, and he said to us, please tell the people of your state to remember us not by our fears, but by our dreams, that they are living their dreams. That is what I mean by the kingdom of heaven is near. It has never been nearer than it is in Minneapolis. The other thing that I think is so important that is happening in Minneapolis right now is they are leaderless. They are responding to all of this in a leaderless way. They don't have a Martin Luther King. It is hyper local, it's without ego, and their strength is that there is not a person in the front. They said their religion is a practice. It has trained them to show up, not to perfect it, just to practice it, right? So they are responding leaderless. The movement is the whole city of Minneapolis. It's not one person, it's not one activist, it's not one religious leader, it is everyone. They said it's time to be Christ-like and get a whip and start flipping tables because the people of this city have never been this afraid and they show up despite the fact that they're afraid. They show up afraid. I told this story on social media yesterday, but we heard from just a member of the Native American community talking about what he's been doing in his neighborhood. He says fear of his imprisonment and loss of his family is something that's very real to him, that he wasn't doing anything differently every day than what Renee Good was. And we have to do this afraid. There is no other option. And he said, I'm an atheist. And he said, it's amazing to be standing or sitting in front of this, sea of 650 clergy people and admit this, but I am an atheist Jew, Native American. And he burst into tears and he said, but if there is a God, if there is a God, and I stand before him one day and he asked me, what did you do when they came for your neighbors? I will say I didn't do enough, but I did all that I could. And I will never forget that. I will never forget the strength and the words of the people who are just trying to keep their neighbors alive. That's what I learned. And we took that learning and we did go out into the streets and we marched with up to 75,000, the crowd estimate was, of the people of Minneapolis. We also went to Target. The clergy went to Target, and Sherry was there too, and a group of, I don't know, there was probably 300 of us, and we sang and we sang and we sang. Target is headquartered in Minneapolis, and they have been allowing ICE to stage in their parking lots, and they've been allowing ICE to take their employees. And so they have some demands for Target. They have demands for large corporations right now to be Fourth Amendment corporations, which means people who uphold people's Fourth Amendment rights. The general strike meant that almost every store and business and restaurant in Minneapolis shut down except for the large corporations. And so they are working really hard and asking us to do this, to do the same kind of thing, to take direct action with our with large corporations, Delta Airlines, Target. There's a whole list of them. I have all kinds of resources that I will share with you at some other time. The kingdom of God is near. It is here too. It is alongside the violence. But it's time for us to get to neighboring, to learn how to love our neighbors. It's time for us to start speaking the truth, and to help those who do not see the truth to see the truth. The murder of Alex Pettis is being lied about by our government. What they are saying did not happen. There's videos. You guys can watch it with your own eyes. He did not pull a gun on the ICE agents ever. That didn't happen. He was shot 9 times on the ground after he had been punched and kicked in the head and pepper sprayed in the eyes. And what he was doing was filming them. That's what he had in his hand. And he was helping a woman who had been thrown to the ground by ICE. Just a woman who was in her neighborhood trying to go to work, well, maybe not go to work, but go to the store. This was not a protest. This was just what the people of Minneapolis do every day, which is show up for their neighbors. And he was doing what they all were doing, what they have all been doing. And they disarmed him on the ground. He had a legal right to carry his weapon. He was an ICU nurse. His entire life has been helping other people. And his last words were to say to the woman that he was trying to help off the ground, "Are you okay?" He was showing us how to neighbor when he died. May we learn from his example. Amen.